Thanks for having me on the show. Sounds like, what to do when he says he needs space. I've been in this situation myself with a girl that I'm in love with. And, what do you do when he says he needs space? So I have about 4 steps that I would advise someone on. But, when someone says I need some space for myself, these 6 little words usually arrive out of the blue and plunge you into kind of a world of confusion. So you go into like, well, what's my next move? And first of all, I tell people don't panic. There's plenty of good reasons why a man needs space. And if you're a supportive woman, most of the time, this is really a short-term thing. So you don't necessarily indicate the beginning of an end to a relationship. In fact, there's, like I said, 4 steps I think you can do. Now, I see a lot of stuff in the public space about the subject, and none of it is based in psychology studies. None of it feels real world to me. When I read a lot of coaches or just articles about people who've been through this, again, it's like they talk about it like it's a game. And it's all about the pickup and the win and the look, it's like tennis. You can hit the ball over the net, but you can't run to the other side of the court and hit it back. Like the other person has to hit it back eventually. So, in my experience, what happened in mine is I had told the girl I needed some time to think. And I had actually told her, I think, I hope you find some happiness. And even my words were chosen wrong because I was so overwhelmed. What I meant to say was, I hope you found some happiness, because I know that weekend she had a conversation with a family member about a situation that she was going through. And mine was more about like that day I was just overwhelmed. So I always like to tell people is make sure you check like maybe what's going on too, because I was taking some medicine. It was like you're called PPIs. Yeah. And acids. And they were vastly affecting my ability to handle things and my stress levels. They were making me irritable, more temperamental. And, when I stopped taking those not too long ago, everything was completely different. It was like night and day, yeah. And so, I always tell people, do an inventory check and see what's going on there too. But remember, men and women were prizes, we're valuable. And as soon as, he utters those tiny words, it's a powerful sentence, but it's easy to feel like all the power, goes to him. Yeah, and I would say this is probably mainly for women, because men typically do this. Women don't. Okay, good, strong feminine energy is connection and bonding, whereas when men feel troubled, they go to their man cave, and sometimes if that's in their head. And I think women don't really think about that sometimes. That men need peacefulness sometimes in their head, and because he's the one who requests the space, it's easy to fall into that trap of thinking he's belling out, abandoning ship, so to speak. So the more you scramble for ideas to keep him there and agonize over what you did wrong and let the paranoia kind of run wild, I always tell people put a gigantic red stop sign to that, because as soon as you get a chance to talk to him, and in my case, I called, the girl that I'm in love with, I called her 24 hours later. So I have kind of like a rule here. Like I process pretty quick. I'm like a 24 to 72 hour kind of guy. Like 3 days max for just about anything I ever need to think about. And in my instance, I came to, a lot of good conclusions on my end. Like I was like, you know what? I'm in love with this woman. I want to be with her forever. I'm going to get, and I invited her out to dinner that Friday. Our issue happened on a Saturday. And I said the statement on a Sunday, and I was calling her by Monday. So you can see how fast I worked through how I was feeling. And, and I had a lot going on. I was putting in some floors in my mother's house. Like I said, those PPI pills I was taking were just affecting me, like just in general, just kind of like taking a medicine. You just know something's not right. And also had some business stuff I was working on. I had a lot of stresses, and then you throw the relationship thing in there in the mix, and I just felt completely overwhelmed. So what I tell people is space can be normal for men. It's a normal need, okay? And if you've ever read the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, by a PhD, which is my point, is if you Google these things, you need to leave the relationship, he doesn't love you anymore. No, if you look at PhD stuff, you can clearly tell that's not the case in studies. But there's no doubt about it that sometimes a guy asking for space because he's doing something, that you in your mind, you might think, oh, there must be somebody else. He must not desire me anymore. That's usually not the case. I would say 90% of the time that's not the case. Men typically just don't know how to handle things out loud. They handle things on their own. So sometimes needs are conflicting is what I'm saying. So what I would advise people to do if you get in this situation, and for the people listening on the radio and iTunes radio show, is put a timer on it. Okay. Don't give into anxiety. When the incident happens, in your head, say, I'm willing to let him have some space and understand, for X amount of time, whatever that might be for you personally. For me, I'm a 72-hour guy. I think within 3 days, just about anybody should know anything they really need to feel about me. And that process, it may not be the same for everybody. But the $1 million question is, how long do you wait? So I'm going to give you like 4 steps, like I talked about above, on how to navigate that. But the top emotion you'll probably feel when a man asks for space for women is anxiety. It's no wonder, because it leaves you feeling vulnerable. And many women are about security. So vulnerability makes them feel very nervous very quickly. But, what I remind people is, it's funny when we come to relationships and dating, we talk about this as like, they don't love you, they're walking away. This happens in marriages all the time. Good marriages go through this all the time. Or someone will be like, you know what, I'm just going to go to a hotel tonight. Or, you know what, I'm just going to, go sleep on the couch. What do you think that is? I mean, that's giving someone space. It's just not said. It's when people hear it that they really freak out about it, which is why I usually tell people to calm down a little bit. The most common response is to agree to give a man space and then freak out. Call him the next day, text him, show up at his place. And if you give a man, like I said, 24 to 72 hours, all those things will probably become very okay. You just have to give them that initial moment. Another knee-jerk response is to, take his request for space and be like, you know what, I'm just going to start dating and seeing someone else, and doing the knee-jerk response to that. But what I will say is step number 2 is invest in yourself a little bit. It's a good opportunity for you to go, you know what, I'm going to work out a little bit. I'm going to get in a little bit of shape here. I'm going to go back to taking care of my own mindset and remember that I am valuable, that it's probably likely he still loves me and wants to be with me. But while he does what he needs to do, I'm going to go ahead and work on myself. With all that extra time, work on yourself by doing what makes you feel strong and sexy and confident, all the things that attracted him to you in the first place. And when you take the opportunity to get the best of yourself back, when you notice he returns, you'll be strong and you'll be willing to do things maybe you may not have been able to do when you were going through your anxiety state. Okay. Number 3 would be let him come to you. Like I said, in my instance, I called her, the very next day. I asked her, hey, how are you doing? And I talked about her about general things. I didn't talk about the relationship, and that was on purpose. Because number 1, I don't think when you talk to someone, the first thing you should do is throw the elephant at them. And maybe, a lot of people may be wanting to hear the first word, I love you, I miss you, I want to be with you. I had all those feelings. However, I knew on Friday I was going to invite her to dinner and tell her everything I had thought about and what I felt. And it was all really good. Like I said, it was, I love you. I can't see my life without you. I want you to move everything that you have into my house. I mean, that was going to be my dinner. And, this is probably one of the hardest steps to follow for some women, is to let them come to you. But only if you truly love a man and you're supportive, you're going to be waiting for this anyways. And waiting in a good, healthy fashion. But only if you're spending more time investing in yourself will this make a lot of sense to you. So, if you're crying, over him and stalking his Facebook and devising ways to get him back versus working on yourself, remember, I remind people, if you're totally in love, 9 times out of 10, this is going to come back. Someone is going to make contact, and it's going to usually be the person who did it. Now, what I do advise is once he contacts you, you need to do something about it. You need to be all over it. You need to be so my events that went down in mine, which is step number 4, know when his time's up, or, know when your timer, your schedule is is, one of the things I said and the steps I took in mine is, we got in, a disagreement. It wasn't even a fight. It was a disagreement on a Saturday. I told her I needed time to think about things on a Sunday. I called her on a Monday, called her on a Tuesday, called her on a Wednesday, said something sweet to her on Thursday. I woke up that morning and I had told her, I hope you have a good morning, my love. And, she wrote back, I love that you said love, and thank you. That was very sweet. And on Friday I sent her, I hope you have a great morning, because I already knew I was going to invite her to dinner that night and pretty much probably give her everything I think and felt she had been waiting for and wanted to talk about. So how legitimate, your time is to you is a big deal. But back to the $1 million question of when is this time up, or what should your timer be? First of all, remember that the clock is ticking, but as soon as he contacts you in any form or fashion, that clock needs to stop. And this is where women are real bad about this. They start looking at like, well, if he contacts me and I don't get I want to be back together, or I've thought about things, they automatically go, well, I guess it's real. When if a man's contacting you, which a lot of men, that's hard for them to do in the first place. Most men don't talk out loud about their feelings. So he's contacting you to kind of let you know, I'm right here, So for example, if we're talking about your husband, or a boyfriend of more than 2 years, well, then you need to give them the benefit of the doubt. And you also need to think about, how legitimate is his reason for requesting space? Determine how long to give him. Is he asking for space because he's lost his job? Has something happened? Is he just overwhelmed mentally? It's okay to ask for clarification on a situation. And, and a lot of times I always tell people, don't ask them in the first 24 hours when they say it, because all they know how to do is push you away at that exact moment. And they'll pretty much say things that probably aren't even true if you were to talk to them on the phone. But I would say in 3 days, if you haven't heard from them, ask for clarification of the situation, and get an idea of where they really stand. I mean, 3 days later, they're going to have an idea whether they still don't want to see you, or those feelings are starting to fade and they're starting to come down to reality of their love for you. So, like I said, how legitimate. You got to remember, if a guy in the past or in your relationship, and like I said, we're talking about over a year or two here, if they have taken time out of their life to put your feelings first, don't be shy to give them a couple of days and put their feelings first. Okay. And women typically live in the moment. So because of this, it's very hard for women to do. But I would also say that if he hasn't contacted you in 3 days and you do talk to him and you get clarification and he still feels like he's just not interested, well, then you need to work on yourself and you need to step back from it and wait for him to come back to you if that's ever what he truly desires. But if he has reached out to you and he is making attempts, even if the subject isn't being broached, he's basically showing you what he feels, and you should take that into account. You have to really kind of think about how much he's put into the relationship. Has your guy earned the right to put his needs ahead of yours? Like I said, it's not a question of who does more and when. It's more about acknowledging the status of your relationship. If you're in a long-term relationship, like I said, has he ever done something similar for you? Have you gone through something where he's basically known, I'm not going to get all the love I want from her, but I'm going to stick through this with her anyways? Does he generally put in time and effort to be a good partner to you? When you call him, does he pick up the phone? Is he always there in some capacity? If he does, it's very obvious that he deserves more time than a guy who hasn't built any what I call relationship credit with you. And, if you're a man and you're listening to the segment, if you put in that time, if you've made the gestures and now she's not returning yours, you have to let her come to you. So, and I would also say, is he updating you along the way? Even when a man is going through a crisis, if he's calling you or making a joke with you or sending you an occasional picture, he's basically telling you he's still right there. He's not going anywhere. And that usually is an indication of it really wasn't you that he was overwhelmed with. It's that he has other things going on. And that's a time for you to be supportive, not run from the relationship, not question it. Again, if you look at how my situation went down, I was taking this, over-the-counter medicine that was clearly affecting me. I was, exhausted physically the day before from the day before from putting in my mother's floors of her house. And, then you have the relationship stuff, and then you have business stuff that I take care of. I was completely overwhelmed. And, a woman who loves you and knows you needs to recognize these things at the same time. So you have your timer, but you also need to recognize who you're with and what they might be going through. And, the first thing I usually tell women is, has he ever taken time out of his life to accommodate you? And if he has, give him the benefit of the doubt. So exactly how much time is up to you, really. It's up to each individual to give an indication. But if it's a new relationship and his feelings aren't legitimate, a couple of days to a week is usually enough to know. If it's someone that you've been dating for a while, usually they're going to come around in about 3 days, right? Because they're not new. They're not really thinking about, well, I'm not really sure, if I care about this woman or not. If you've been in a relationship like 2 years, the man's pretty much going to turn around pretty quick if he still has interest. Back to the 3 bullet points I've made in this is that agree to meet your partner's need for space. Ask for clarification of the situation after about 72 hours, but put on your timer. If he doesn't come back and try to do things in a certain amount of time, his interest level has dropped dramatically. And remember, you're valuable too. And get back to that high value woman that attracted him in the first place. And I do not advise dating other people during this stage, because you are only going to conflict yourself eventually. You're going to feel powerful about it. Someone else cares about me. They're showing me attention. But a couple of months will pass, and that will eventually catch up with you and go, I wonder if I would have met him or, responded to his contact, especially if it was in about 72 hours of what was going on. And if he really puts himself out there at some point, let's say some time goes by, and then he's like, hey, I want to see you. I miss you. I love you. And let's say it's a little past your timer. Really take a moment there to say, yeah, he didn't meet my stopwatch, but he's right there. He wants to meet me. What I would advise in women who have asked me this question in the past, what's a dinner going to hurt you? Really think about that. You may go there, and all the feelings you have with a hug and a kiss and some good conversation and some smiles, you may hear everything you've been wanting to hear. Like in my case, like I said, I was willing to go to dinner, or I did an invite for dinner on a Friday to a really nice restaurant. I'd already had the reservation set up and everything. I was already confident that she was going to, because our communication, she'd been picking up the phone and calling me back throughout the week. And then her response to my good morning, my love on a Thursday, I thought, for sure I'm going to see this girl on Friday. I'm going to make the most of it. I cannot wait to see her in my head. Of course, I'm not spilling all this out because I want to basically put it out there in a very genuine and in-person manner when I saw her. So that's bullet point number 3. Let him come to you. And that's what I did. I came to her. And so for the listeners on iTunes and the radio show, that would be my advice on that kind of thing. And, it's not real hard to know when somebody loves us because they simply can't spend that much time away from us. Anybody can get hurt. Anybody can go through a moment. Anybody can have a moment. Anybody can need a moment out of nowhere. But ultimately what you'll notice, and I really like the 72-hour rule, is that in 72 hours, if the man's really in love with you, you're going to hear from him in some capacity. Take that opportunity, get some clarification. And if he invites you to dinner, coffee, drinks, in person, at your house, at his house, take that opportunity. That's not something you want to look back on and feel like, I wonder if I would have done that night, that day. And I think, to your listeners, I think that'll really help them. I say stay away from the average life coach that you see on YouTube and the articles that you see online. They are doom and gloom a lot of times. And that's because they're not based in psychological studies. So if you let him come to you and he does, I recommend taking the opportunity to make the best version of your love, so to speak. And thanks for having me on the show.